Section 2. Finding and verifying the objective evidence. Objective evidence is defined as data which is supporting the existence or verity of something. The auditors must ensure that the evidence is sufficient and objective and can be used to demonstrate the conformity or non-conformity. For an evidence to be objective and useful for the purpose of management system audits, the evidence should be complete, that is, all expected content is contained. For example, if you as an auditor want to collect the objective evidence for organizational arrangements to determine the external issues which may influence their OHS management system against clause 4.1, then you shall not rely on the verbal statement of the safety manager. You shall ask the relevant documented information in order to have a complete objective evidence. The second feature of objective evidence is that they should be correct. Sometimes the way things are done are different than the way they are documented. For example, the documented information specify that risk assessment shall be carried out by the respective workplace manager in consultation with the relevant workers, but in reality, the safety manager is doing all the risk assessments. In all such cases, the auditors use interviewing or questioning to gather the objective evidence. The third feature of objective evidence is that they should be consistent. It means that the objective evidence should be reliable and must not be representing single isolated event. For example, gathering objective evidence for organizational emergency response actions effectiveness should not rely on single rehearsal or testing event from a small workplace. Rather, it should be reviewed from a number of testing events for more than one workplaces in the organization to see the consistency. The last but not the least feature of objective evidence is that they should be current and up to date. For example, collecting evidence for the organizational compliance for regulatory and other requirements should be for the latest regulatory requirements. In the management system auditing, the objective evidence is collected by document review, observations, interviewings, or a combination of them. The auditor should exercise care when collecting objective evidence which is solely based on the verbal statements, those too from the workers. There can be many issues including communication barriers which may result in collecting wrong information. For example, you as an auditor ask a worker if any training was provided before being deployed. The worker may not understand the question or due to fear, stress or anxiety may respond incorrectly. Such evidence is not reliable and does not become objective evidence. It is therefore good practice to seek the procedures and records from the relevant person when questioning them. The questions should therefore be carefully asked to aid the objective evidence collection in addition to observation as well as the document review. You shall now do some exercises to learn about the objective evidence. Please read through this slide and once ready, move to the next slide. Please also download the exercise 2A documents from the resources page. Please read through this slide and once ready, move to the next slide. Please download the exercise 2B documents from the resources page. Please read through this slide and once ready, move to the next slide. Please download the exercise 2C documents from the resources page. Interviewing is a very important tool for the auditors and helps them collect objective evidence. However, effective interviewing requires knowledge and skill to elicit useful information from the auditee. Let's see how an effective interview can be conducted. The interviewing has a wider purpose in the context of the management system auditing. They are used to confirm and gauge the understanding of workers and managers about the OHS management system processes and their role in effective implementation of OHS management system. During the audit, either on-site or remote, the auditors have to ask how a process, for example, risk assessment process works to gauge the understanding of those involved in the process. Interviewing is also a great tool to gauge the top management commitment for the OHS management system. The OHS policy is the manifestation of management commitment, but many a times OHS policy is drafted by the consultants and often the top managements have no understanding about OHS management system and how their commitment is needed. The interviewing can reveal many things about the top management commitment. For example, the auditor may, during the discussion, ask the managing director about any challenges and how the top management is overcoming those challenges. The ISO 45001 requires that the workers should know the OHS policy and their role in OHS management system. An OHS management system can only achieve its intended outcomes if all the employees are on board regarding the OHS management system. If an OHS management system is designed in isolation from the employees, it shall be ineffective and inefficient. For example, a transportation company cannot achieve the OHS performance till the time the drivers are not taken on board and they understand their role in OHS performance. Interviews are useful to confirm the employees' awareness about OHS matters. The interviews can also be used to check if the workers or their representatives are involved in matters related to OHS. For example, the risk assessments are being developed by a consultant or a team from safety department, and the workers who are exposed to OHS risks are not even consulted or involved. Many a times the auditors find issues with the documented information and they cannot make a judgment about conformity or non-conformity unless they ask the respective manager to clarify the things. This is very significant aspect of interviewing, and you will be given exercises in which you will identify many issues with the documented procedures which shall require the clarification. Remember, the purpose of interviewing is not to intimidate the auditee but to collect the objective evidence, which can be either a conformity or non-conformity. It is therefore very important that interviews or questioning should be carried out in a friendly manner. This can be done by starting a relevant discussion and eliciting the purposeful responses without having them know that they are being interviewed. The important thing for the auditor is to know what evidence they want to elicit and how that evidence relates to the ISO 45001 class requirements. Without a firm understanding about this aspect, the interview shall not be very effective, as at the end, the information shall not be useful to make a judgment about the conformity or non-conformity. The auditor should avoid leading and closed-ended questions. For example, do you involve workers in OHS matters, or do you carry out risk assessments? Instead, open-ended questions should be asked. For example, on what issues do you consult or involve the workers or their representatives? Sometimes the closed-ended question may be asked to check if a certain requirement is being conformed to, but the closed-ended question must be followed by open-ended questions. The auditors must have situational awareness to observe if the auditee has understood the question in the same context in which it was asked. Communication barriers exist, and therefore the auditors must ensure that the auditee is responding to the question and arranging for the right evidence. For example, you as an auditor ask an auditee about the traceability of calibrated items, and the auditee responded that yes, we carry out the calibration of gauges and provides you with calibration records. In such situation, you should not shy to rephrase your question so the relevant objective evidence could be collected. As I discussed previously, it's all about eliciting the objective evidence, and it is the best thing to create a friendly environment. As an auditor, you must wait for the auditee to respond and provide the relevant evidence. Do not jump to the conclusions on the basis of first one or two sentences. For example, you are auditing class 8.2 emergency preparedness and response, and you ask how effective is your action plan. The auditee started that it was very effective, but lately we had an issue, and without listening to complete details, you make up your mind that there is something wrong with their action plan or it's ineffective. You should listen carefully and with patience, and even if you think the auditee is not responding as you want, you should not stop them. Rather than wait for them to respond, and if you think the response did not lead you to objective evidence, you can ask the question again. Remember, you are not doing a criminal investigation. You are auditing an organization's OHS management system whose OHS performance benefits shall be shared by their own employees. So you should remain neutral and in no way let your opinions or preference ruin the purpose of interviewing. And finally, ask the relevant questions to save time. Interviews are often stressful, especially when an organization's ISO certification is dependent on the audit. Irrespective of the significance of non-conformities for an OHS management system, the organizations do not want them as a result of the audits. They only wish for an audit by a third party that shows no non-conformities or even potential non-conformities. They believe this is the best thing and shows their commitment to and performance of OHS management system, although in reality it does not. Keeping in view this factor, the employees shall be very fearful of the audit and least they wish that objective evidence of non-conformity is collected through their interviews. So the fear factor shall be a barrier for the auditors, which may limit the capacity and capability of this process to collect objective evidence. Opposite to fearful worker is an enthusiastic worker who shall voluntarily provide you with unnecessary information. Such employees try to portray a beautiful picture in an intentional or unintentional way which can be misleading to the auditors. Therefore, auditors should be careful about who to talk to. Sometimes there are language barriers as well, especially when you are auditing an organization which employs people from different nationalities. You should be considerate of language barriers and how they can affect the process. People from various cultures have different norms. Some people like to hug and shake hands while others may not. So you should be very careful and respect people from various cultures and be considerate of their culture specific norms and requirements. Many people suffer from psychological issues, for example anxiety, which restrict their ability to respond. If you observe that a worker or manager is not comfortable in responding, then you should not insist on seeking the evidence from the same person. In real audit situations, the auditees are often very much concerned about the audit outcomes. Least they want that an effective audit is carried out which may show some non-conformities. It is not uncommon for the auditee to make interruptions during the interviews or distract the auditors with irrelevant discussions. The auditors must be cognizant of the fact that they have to collect objective evidence of conformity or non-conformity. If they don't have objective evidence, they shall be unable to present the audit findings at the end of the audit, or the sample collected shall be too small to be relied upon. Exercise 3 is a combination of 4 exercises and provides you an opportunity to develop the questions that you will ask the respective manager during the informal interview. The questions should be designed to seek clarification from the auditee regarding the documented information. You shall be provided with a fictitious company's OHS documented information. You shall need to identify if the respective procedure is enough as objective evidence or if some clarifications are needed. The answer key shall be provided, but you should only use it to compare your answer. You shall need to develop the questions in 3 stages where applicable for each exercise. Number 1, if you have any clarification needed after a procedure review. Number 2, if you have any clarification needed after the relevant forms review. Number 3, if you have any clarification needed after reviewing the records on the respective forms. Remember, the answer key shall not include all the possible questions and have been given as examples only. Please read through the slide and download the relevant documents, that is exercise 3A from resources section. Please read through the slide and download the relevant documents, that is exercise 3B from the resources section. Give it a try before reviewing the sample answer key. Please go through the slide and download the relevant documents, that is exercise 3C from resources section. Give it a try before reviewing the sample answer key. Please go through the slide and download the relevant documents, that is exercise 3D from the resources section. Give it a try. The third important tool for collecting the objective evidence is observation. During the remote audit, the observation shall not be equally effective or in some cases not even possible. During the on-site audit, the auditors observe many things, including the OHS culture of the organization and how the processes actually work. The auditors get an opportunity to see the nature and level of the risks which the workers are exposed to and to assess if the level of documented information is commensurate with these risks. The auditors also observe if there are any high-risk activities from health and safety perspective and can ask if there are any operational controls established and implemented against those risks. They can also see if the workers follow the documented safe system of work procedures. Similarly, they can observe the attitude of workers, managers, directors, as well as the top management towards the occupational safety and health. The top management commitment for OHS can best be seen by observing the workplaces. For example, are there any engineering controls deployed for high-risk activities, personal protective equipment are made available, etc. In practice, observation leads to the document review which are clarified through interviews to collect the objective evidence. For example, you as an auditor witnessed an unsafe act. For example, a person was working on a ladder during plant maintenance and you observed that the worker did not have 3-point contact with the ladder. Your observation leads you to ask for the procedure regarding safety for work at height activities, and while reviewing the documents, you may find the written instruction for safe use of ladders. You ask the respective manager, how do you communicate these instructions to workers, or are the workers given any training regarding safe use of ladders? So the auditor's observation can create opportunities for objective evidence collection. In the next slides, you will be presented with some scenarios. Your job is to analyze the situation and identify objective evidence to ensure if it is a non-conformity or otherwise. Please also mention the relevant ISO 45001-2018 clause. Go through the slide and click next to see the first scenario. You have to establish on the basis of the scenario that there is any non-conformity or not, as per the requirements of ISO 45001-2018. Scenario 1. You observe that the OHS policy of the organization was revised in year 2016, but the old version of the policy was still displayed on the notice board of the machine shop during the audit on 22 Feb 2017. What do you think? Is it a non-conformity or not? Think of the answer before moving to the next slide where the answer is given. Please read the suggested answer. Scenario 2. You observed two workers smoking outside a building where no smoking near the vicinity was displayed. You asked the respective manager, who replies that the oil store from this place has been shifted and this is no more a no smoking zone. He further told that this board will be removed soon. Think of the answer if it is a non-conformity or not. And if it is a non-conformity, then identify the relevant ISO 45001 clause against which it is a non-conformity. Now move to the next slide to find the answer. Please read the suggested answer. You observe a lot of acid fumes in the surface treatment shop. You ask the respective manager how the workers managed to perform their duties in such corrosive environment which must have affected their health. The manager replied that the ppm value of acidic fume is within the legal limits. You ask how you measure the ppm value because there was no detection instrument installed within the surface treatment shop. The manager replied that this is carried out by the inspection department on annual basis. What do you think? Is this situation a non-conformity or not? If you think it's a non-conformity, then what is the specific clause against which you think it's a non-conformity? Move to the next slide to see the answer. Scenario 4. You observe that an emergency siren is ringing in the paint shop but no worker is evacuating. You ask the relevant supervisor why everyone didn't indicate on the emergency alarm. The supervisor replied that the said alarm is malfunctioning for the last 3 days and workers are aware of it. Therefore, they do not evacuate. You then ask, what if there is an actual emergency situation right now? The supervisor replied that in such cases, workers will be verbally asked to vacate by the manager once he will receive an emergency call. What do you think? Is it a non-conformity or not? And if it is a non-conformity, then what is the relevant ISO 45001 clause? Scenario 5. You observe that a worker is pushing a metal sheet with his hands into the shear machine for cutting into small pieces. While doing so, his both hands come into close proximity to the cutting blades. The second worker on the other side of the machine is collecting small metal pieces manually. He too picks the metal strips while the blade goes up and removes his hands while the blades come down. The movement of blade is very quick. You ask the respective supervisor about your concern regarding the safety of both workers. The supervisor replied that the matter is not much of a concern because there has been no such incident since the machine has been installed 5 years ago and both workers are very skillful. What do you think? Is it a non-conformity or not? And if it is a non-conformity, what is the relevant clause of ISO 45001? Scenario 6. You observe that there is no clean drinking water facility near the workplace. The workers needed to walk approximately 300 to 400 feet to access clean drinking water. What do you think? Is it a non-conformity or not? And if it's non-conformity, then what is the relevant ISO 45001 clause?